the new international order, especially on the basis of the contemporary debate in the world security environment, is going to be shaped mostly by the strategic thinking which the country will have. What a country would like to be by 2020. So strategic thinking, the strategic capabilities will be guiding factors for the overall emerging power, in the sense how they are going to really get accepted by the rest of the world. It's not question of just getting emerged, it's question of getting acceptance in the overall building of the international norms and values. It's question of assuming the responsibility to lead the world affairs. It's question of managing with the inherent contradictions domestically, at the domestic level. So lots of these factors will really impede the process of this shift of center of gravity. Maybe I will stop it here, and if they have some questions I can answer. Thank you very much.
At the end of these three excellent presentations, we can understand that there are three very contrasting perspectives we got from three different presentations. At the one hand, our first panelist argued that if emerging power has to be accepted in the world order, we have to reform existing institutional norms. On the other hand, our second panelist highlighted that there is a new consensus and there is a kind of ambiguity as far as economic indices are concerned, and it shows conflicting trend. Last panelist, he argues that basically there are some trend of emerging powers because of some new challenges like non-state actors, and then also because of changing economic equation. There are a lot of new things coming up like changing power relationship and power structure. I think these three contrasting perspective enough for you to have certain burning questions. If you have, please, now floor is open, and then you can discuss these points and you can come with your questions.
My name is Tomoko Kim. I came from Japan, one of the declining economic powers. I have one question to Dr. Sorry. I still have a listening problem, so please forgive me if I missed your point. But I think you talked about how we define the emerging powers in the international law, but more than how much great powers have influenced to make international laws in favor of them. And then even the states are all equal to the international law. We when those laws are formed, we still can witness power games there to make the formation of international laws. And then just like great powers in the past made the new laws, now we also witness similar cases like ATT or the cluster ban treaty. So, and then we still have to remember that how to use the laws, such international laws, is also power game. So, in that sense, the states are still equal to, and then I'd like to hear your opinions in that sense. And then the second question is to scholars from Poland, and then even Dr. Kumar mentioned a little bit that what do you think about China's threat that we discussed in Asia? And then I had some chances to discuss with people from Western European countries, and then maybe China is too far, so they cannot understand how Japanese people or maybe Indian people feel about China's threat. So and then one of the scholars told me to pay money if Japan and then the US force EU to limit the arms export to China. And then, so I'd like to hear your perspective, because Poland is much closer to China, and then so maybe China is much better than Russian. So please.
Different states, especially superpowers, on creating norms of international law. We should regard that we have two, the most important source of international law. We have international customary law and international treaty law. And as regards international treaty law, we can observe a greater impact of the superpowers of powerful states on creating the norms, because they can make their proposal, they can make drafts of the treaties, and they can invite the other states to sign the treaties. And here is visible the greater impact of the powerful states on creating international law. But as we regard customary international law, the principle of sovereign equality of states is still very strong. And here it is very difficult to say that any state, any powerful state has a bigger influence on creating norms of the law. It is because of specific of customary international law. In order to recognize custom as a source of international law, then should be met two important prerequisites. First, there should be common practice of all states which are members of the international community, all, almost without any exceptions. And the second prerequisite which should be met is that all the states which follows the practice, the common practice, they have to recognize the practice as a law, as a binding law. And that's why here, within the customary international law, it is not visible a greater impact on the creating of legal norms by powerful or superpower states. Thank you very much.
My name is Vignesh. I'm from the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations. I'm a research scholar there. My question is to Dr. Karina. You spoke about the rise of Asian tiger economies. If you see at that point of time, most of it relied on adapting to newer systems of production, as in the changed according to the trends of what was required at that point of time. Many of the economies produced that. So, do you see the current sort of structure of groupings of countries which are coming across? Do they have a similar sort of, is it only for the time being as a trend? And again, you see other countries emerging after that point of time.
You can take, I think, 2 or 3 more questions, then we can.
I just want to get the question and then.
Any other question?
Hello sir, my name is Anand. I am also a PhD scholar in the department. My question is to Bogoslo sir. You have spoken about international law and how it cannot be changed. The existing rules cannot be changed. But what about an alternative? Is it possible to bring about an alternative to the system so as to accommodate all these emerging powers?
I would like to add in this. In the BRICS summit recently held in Delhi, one alternative bank has been proposed. So do you feel that it is easy to reform the existing institution, or should we outrightly dump the existing institution and we should propose new institutions or even laws? Like you said, that shared norms can become a laws. So should we propose new norms or should we reform existing norms? This is a related question to the Anand's questions. Yeah, any other question?
Maybe I'd like to ask a question to Professor Kumar, because if we cannot argue that the center of work is shifting, but history indicates that when the center is shifting, the wars are coming. So what are India's view on the stabilization of the region and maybe on creating the security complex here? Because the situation isn't so stable for now because of the tension between India and China, because of the war with Pakistan and maybe Iran's and North Korea nuclear ambitions. So I would like to ask what are India's perspective on the security here?
Any other questions? From new batch? This time because they answered one question.
Okay, because I think there's also part of the question related to China and how is China being regarded, whether as a threat or not. And this is actually something I think that one of the statements I made yesterday that I want to repeat now summarizes best. From the point of view, I cannot speak from the point of view of the Indian perspective because it's something, even if I tried, I would not probably understand. But from the point of view of European Union in general, I'm not. There is some kind of tension, some anxiety. I wouldn't say it's a fear, because on the one hand, China and relations with China are seen as advantages. So there is a huge demand for China study centers, for China business, Chinese European chambers of commerce, for developing China relations with China in all dimensions, especially economic ones, simply because if we are not with China, we're out of this shift Professor Kumar was talking about. And we stay even further behind, which is unfortunately a fact that the European Union is staying behind. But there are also some, and let's say this anxiety. There are some issues that are treated as dangerous to the as threats to the sovereignty. Like for example, Chinese investments, Chinese companies taking control over European assets, either in Spain or France, or even some minor problems we had with Chinese companies in Poland. It's some kind of threat of influence which is becoming global and which has become ever present. And I think that it's not a problem of China as it is, it's a problem of any superpower that's, okay, let's say rising or has arisen. Few years ago, after the fall of communism, there were many debates in Eastern Europe on US domination, both in economic and political terms in the region, and there were always debates about the threat and the threats to our sovereignty. Today, we debate when the US, let's assume, is to some extent stagnating, we have debate on China. So this is not about China because it's China, but because there's something changing. And as Professor Kumar said, there is a shift, and of course, the former hegemon, or one of the hegemons, because for sometimes we have this multipolar world, it's not fasting the perspective of being left behind. What I think summarizes this notion best from becoming one of the major creditors to one of the major debtors. And this is something that actually summarizes this whole shift of power, so the direction of flow of capital. And as for the Asian tigers, I think that when we talk about Asian tigers, we have to go back to the model of development they followed. Whether we call it developmental capitalism, state-led development, or developmental state, there is always a mix of huge state interventionism linked with state with rapid industrialization and planning. But there is also a capitalism system, and the system was mostly private. And when Asian tigers have developed in the fastest pace,